Okay, so section 2.5 is the last section of chapter 2. Finally, we're going to be through with this chapter and get on to stuff that looks more like math. But we will come back to proofs throughout the year now that we're learning how to do them. So this chapter, I plan to finish the section today. So this homework will be due Monday night. Monday in class, we're going to go through and just do some actual proofs together on worksheets to just practice it some more. Tuesday then, we'll have a quiz on 2.3 to 2.5. Wednesday, review, and Thursday, chapter test for chapter 2. Okay. All right, so section 2.5 had a few pages to it. And in the first page, we went back and just reviewed a little bit about how to name angles. And remember, if you only have one angle at that vertex, you can just call it a single letter. But if you have more than one angle at that vertex, you have to use all three letters. So what they're saying here is, because in this example, I could call this angle LPO, or I could just call it angle P. Well, with proofs, we're always looking for the shortest way to write things. So we're going to be using single letters when we can. That was the point of page 1. Okay? Other than the video. Another video on page 2. But they give us the first theorem in this section that we're going to be able to use in proofs, and that's the right angle theorem. And it says if two angles are both right angles, then those two angles must be congruent. Makes sense? If two angles are both right angles, then those two angles must be congruent. They do a proof here to show that that's true using a two-column proof. The next page, we're going to learn about the same angle supplements theorem that says if two angles are supplementary to the same angle, then those two angles must be equal or congruent, equal in measure. So if two angles are both supplementary to the same angle, so let's say one angle is 60 degrees. What's a supplementary angle to 60? 120. So the other angle is 120, and it says two angles are supplementary to that. So the third angle must also be 120. Do you see that 120 angles are equal to each other? That's the supplementary angles theorem. The same angle supplements theorem, sorry. If two angles are supplementary to the same angle, then those two angles must be congruent or equal to each other. Okay? The same works for the same angles complements theorem. If two angles are complements to one angle, so if one angle is 30 degrees and two angles are complements to that, those two angles must be 60. Those two angles are now congruent. That's what the same angles complement theorem says. The vertical angles theorem, this is just the proof of the theorem that we already know to be true. When two angles are created by intersecting lines, they're called vertical angles, those opposite angles, and those angles are congruent. That's the vertical angles theorem. Okay? And you can see how long the proof was to prove it, but now we can use that as fact going forward. Okay? What do I want to do now? Let's just do this proof, and we'll go through how to write a two-column proof to prove things that we're asked to prove. So this one says, given in this diagram, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. What does that mean? Congruent. What's that? Yeah, same measure. Congruent means two angles are the same measure. Angle 1 and angle 2 are the same measure. Angle 3 and angle 4 are the same measure. They want to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. Okay? So when you write a two-column proof, and we're going to get practice on this on Monday, when you write a two-column proof, the very first thing that you do is you write what's given. You have to rewrite what's already been given, because this proof and only this proof is where the information is used to prove it. If you don't write what's given, then you don't know that's true until it's written. It's kind of a pain, but you always rewrite the given very first step. So what they did is they said 1 is congruent to 2 and 3 is congruent to 4, and the reason is it's given. Okay? Then they said 2 and 3 are congruent to each other. Why? Why are 2 and 3, angles 2 and 3, congruent to each other? What's that? There's a theorem. I just talked about it. The vertical angle theorem. There's the reason. Vertical angle theorem. So if angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent, let's think about what we have now. 1's congruent to 2, 2 is congruent to 3, 3 is congruent to 4, therefore 1 is congruent to 4 by the transitive property. Okay? It's just logic. And all of you would be able to probably look at this and logically say, if 1 and 2 are equal and 3 and 4 are equal, 1 and 4 are equal, because you can see these are vertical angles. Well, a proof just forces you to write each step of your thinking down and your reasoning for that step. Okay? Most of us just do this in our head normally. Solve an equation, 3x plus 2 equals 7. Most of us know we're going to subtract 2, we're going to divide by 3. We can do that in our head and almost just routinely now because we've had Algebra 1. But this is forcing us to stop and actually write why we're doing each step. Okay, that's the proof part. Most people don't like proofs, and I don't either. So you're not alone. I didn't like this part of geometry myself. Okay, so let's get to the textbook check. I can find it. Quizzes. Finally, the last section. Angle PLM can be written as angle L, true or false? Can I write PLM? Yeah. Because there's only one angle there at that intersection, I can actually write it as a single letter. In this figure, angle 1 is equal to angle 3 by what theorem? Vertical angles theorem. Question 3. Which theorem is described below? If the measure of angle A and B is 180, and C and B is 180, then A and C are congruent. Same angle supplements theorem. Question 4. Same angle complements theorem. Question 5. Presenter in this section was a man. True? Okay. So the videos that I put on there, I spent a lot of time finding videos that I thought would be helpful. I'm really hoping that you guys are actually using them and watching them because they do help. I try and just do a highlight, assuming you guys have already read and watched the videos, to try and emphasize the things that are important. So make sure you're doing that. Okay? So 2-4 is due tonight. 2-5 is due Monday night.